This is Join Us in France, episode 257. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is a podcast where you'll hear pragmatic advice for your next trip to France. Hopefully, you'll get inspired to go beyond Paris and enjoy the rest of France too. But today we stay in Paris with my guest, Maren Gregerson, and we talk about her 5-day trip to Paris that included 3 generations. They came to Paris with grandparents who enjoyed an afternoon nap, a couple with a 9-year-old who needed to engage in child-friendly activities, and a childless couple who wanted to enjoy the Paris nightlife. How did they make all of that happen? Maren tells us all about it in a minute. Join Us in France is a listener-supported podcast, both in terms of financial support and for guest selection. I believe you, regular traveler, have a lot to contribute, and if you have a good idea for a new podcast episode, email Annie@joinusinfrance.com. You'll find the episode page for this show and the guest notes at joinusinfrance.com/257. The number 257. Bonjour, Maren, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. So today we are going to be talking about a multi-generational trip you took to Paris and the difficulties, I guess, that come with doing a big trip like this with several generations and all of that, and different families, I guess, in a way. Give us the lay of the land a little bit. Who was on this trip with you?
Yeah, so originally my husband and I, and we have a 9-year-old daughter, were planning on going to Paris. And we were starting to plan it, and my father one day casually mentioned that my mom had never been to Paris, and he hadn't been since the 70s.
Ah.
And then about a week later, he's like, I think we're going to come with. So we were, we've traveled with my parents to Disney World and that sort of thing. So we thought, fine.
Yeah.
But my dad is a very even-steven, very fair person. And so he was like, if we're coming as a Christmas gift, we will purchase the plane tickets. But if we do that, we're also going to make sure that your brother and sister-in-law are also invited.
Oh, wow.
And so what started as a small family trip that my immediate family was planning suddenly expanded to my brother and sister-in-law, who we have never traveled with or spent more than a day with, and then my parents as well. And so
So you had age
all
spans. Right. So you had age spans. Your parents are how old, more or less?
My parents are in their 70s. My brother and sister-in-law are in their 40s.
Okay.
And then my husband and we have our 9-year-old.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. All right. So this trip expanded, and
Yes.
And who ended up doing most of the trip planning?
Well, because I think each individual joined at their own time, and because we don't travel with my brother and sister-in-law very often or ever, we all did our own trip planning. So I know what works for my family, and I know that traveling with my father, for instance, he's very... he enjoys what he enjoys, and he's not going to kind of go out of his way to do things that he doesn't enjoy anymore. He's just at that stage of life. And I know that he really needs a nap in the afternoon. That's important for him. And physically, there are certain things that he's not comfortable doing anymore.
Right.
So they planned kind of their trip in the way that they were most comfortable, which means they met with a AAA agent, and they booked most of their travel plans through a travel agent that they felt most comfortable with. And then, they read the Rick Steves books, and they talked to their friends who are of a similar age about what they did. Whereas my husband and I are museum professionals, so we've worked in museums a long time. So we talked to our other museum professional friends, and there are certain things that we like to do, and we also have a 9-year-old, so we have to be really cognizant of what works for them. And then my brother and sister-in-law, like about a month or two before, I think they just went on a bunch of blogs and Instagrams, and they made their own travel itinerary, and about a week before they shared it with us.
Okay, so maybe you guys met like at breakfast and at dinner, or one or the other? Okay.
Yep, usually, so the first night, the first day we spent together, when we landed, and my dad had booked a car, which was something that I would never have done, but it was amazing to have someone after a long trip meeting you there, and I'm pretty comfortable in large cities, but getting out of Charles de Gaulle Airport seems a bit of a nightmare in a car.
Well, if you're going to drive it yourself, it can be, but there's there's plenty of taxis, and there's for people who want to go cheap. There's public transportation. Yeah. Driving it yourself, yes. I wouldn't recommend people land in Charles de Gaulle and then drive into the city. Themselves. If it had been just my family, we probably would have taken public transportation or a taxi. But we then arrived and got checked in at our hotel. And again, had it been just our family, I had several Airbnbs that we were going to stay at. But when my dad joined, Airbnbs are not something his specific generation, or it may be just him, are comfortable with. So he booked us into a really lovely hotel called Hotel Melia, Notre Dame, which is basically about a block from the Shakespeare and Company bookstore. Okay. And it was just a really lovely small hotel. Again, nothing we would have chosen ourselves, but happy to stay there it made my dad comfortable. Was it noisy? So were all three couples there in this hotel? Yes. Okay. And was, because not very far from Shakespeare and Company, it could be noisy, was it, or not? No, it wasn't noisy at all. It was a block off that main drag, and that block off, no one ever turned down our street, and it was there was a little construction going on during the day, but we weren't there. Right. Okay, well that's good. Okay, so I'll look it up and maybe put it as a. Would you recommend this hotel to other travelers? I would absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I could afford it myself, but it was a lovely hotel, and mainly the staff were just amazing. So, like, if we had come in after a day out, and we would stop and grab a bottle of wine before dinner, just to have in the lobby, and as we walked in, the staff would immediately follow us with a corkscrew, and they just kind of anticipated all of our needs and were incredibly kind. And they had a candy jar that changed candy every day. So Eliza, my daughter, was thrilled. That's great. All right. So, and how many days did you stay in Paris? We were there for 5 days. Okay. And then we continued on to England, and my brother went to Amsterdam, and my mom and dad went to Normandy. Okay. And do you feel that was an adequate number of days to spend in Paris? Yeah, I think for our first, would a month have been wonderful? Yes. But 5 days, 5 days was perfectly, I wouldn't have wanted to do any less. Okay. Had we had 7 days, that would have been amazing, but we had a conference we had to be to, so. Right. So you mentioned that you and your husband are museum professionals. Does that mean that you went to a lot of museums? Yeah, that's kind of our norm. Maybe everyone does, but that's just what we do when we travel. So, yes, we go to a lot of museums. That's kind of what we tend to center our museums, and food tends to be what we center our experiences around. Mm-hmm. But it also means that we're really particular about the museums that we go to. I don't go to museums that
are just the museums that they tell you that seems like everyone says. I really want to be interested in the content. I really like small museums because I don't think you feel the pressure I firmly believe as a museum professional, you should never spend more than 2 hours in a museum in one go, just because you get museum fatigue.
Sure.
And it's exhausting. And then what you started off being like, I love this place, by like hour 3, you start hating it because you're tired and your feet hurt. So we really wanted to go to museums that you felt were kind of doable in an hour or two, that had something that interested all 3 of us.
Mm-hmm. So I assume you didn't go to the Louvre?
No.
Okay. Did you go to the Orsay?
No.
So which ones did you go to?
I think I would love to go to the Orsay, and obviously the Louvre my brother went to the Louvre, and obviously I would like to go at some point.
Yeah.
But for this trip, we went to the Musée d'Orangerie.
L'Orangerie, yeah.
D'Orangerie. And I think that was outstanding because, first of all, it was August and we didn't wait in any lines for any of our museums. But that one was really beautiful because in the morning it was quiet. Mm-hmm. There were very few people there. And we could really kind of take in the art as I think it was meant to be seen, as like a sanctuary to the city. Mm-hmm. But then also what was really lovely about it was that was one of the few museums that we saw that had a designated children's area.
Right.
And that was lovely for Eliza to be able to go and draw for a bit. Obviously, like, we brought our own drawing materials and like scavenger hunts for her, but that was really nice in terms of having a little break for her.
So where'd you find the scavenger hunts for her?
We just make them ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
And actually, contrary to what you said, a lot of museums in Paris have an area dedicated to kids. I can't say all of them do, but most of them do.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And so then we went to the Museum of Decorative Arts. Which my favorite American museum is the Cooper Hewitt Museum, and my favorite London museum is the V&A.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we really like design museums, but because we had come from the Orangerie, we just went for the jewelry collection.
Okay.
Because my daughter, obviously, it's a beautiful, black box room with, lots of jewels. It's organized in a really cool way. Uh-huh. And their store is really good. I love a museum store.
So this is really important for everybody listening. When you go to a museum, and you're the professional, but I do go to an awful lot of museums, I think the best way to enjoy a museum is to decide what you want to see there before you go. So you go for the jewelry collection, or you go for the old instrument collection, or whatever it is, That's a really good way to do this, I think. I mean, what do you think? I mean, this is your job, so.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think always at museums, the best part is being surprised by a collection you weren't expecting to love. But it is nice to know that, my goal at this museum is just to see this, and anything else is a cherry on top, you know?
Yeah.
But our absolute favorite museum was, and I cannot say it in French no matter how many times I've tried, it's the Musée des Arts Forains.
Yeah, so the Musée des Arts Forains. It's a lovely, lovely place. Very odd, actually. It's a private museum. Which means that it's never free and it's not open all the time like the other one. Some of the other ones that we've mentioned, they're free on the first Sunday of the month or whatever. This one is not. And it is off, what's the name of that place, that area? Anyway, it's not quite in the city center, but it's easy to get to by bus anyway. I took the bus. I don't know. There's probably a metro station right there.
There's a metro station, and it starts with a B, the area. It's an old wine. It's the old wine warehouses.
It's awful. I've been there so many times and I can't think of the name right now, but it'll come back to me. And it's, well, tell us what it's like. Tell us what you experienced.
Well, first of all, how we found it, well, there was a New York Times article about like 3 small museums for children that people miss. And then we also got a book called like The Little Museums of Paris. That's this lovely little illustrated book. And so it was highlighted in both of those. And my daughter, we let her pick, like, everyone got to, because there were so many people on this trip, everyone picked one thing that was their priority. Mm-hmm. And so her priority was going to this museum because in the article it said that you could ride a bunch of carousels, which is what she was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So that was her one thing that she wanted to do in Paris. And so we booked, because it's a guided tour experience, you have to book ahead of time.
Yes.
But they only do English tours, I believe, twice a week. And we were not going to be, and during August, because lots of things are different hours, we were not going to be there on the weekend, and that's when they did an English tour.
Oh.
So we did a French tour, which was actually 100% fine for us. I speak a little bit of French, not well, but the guide, it was wonderful. I think because so much you could tell through expression, and then they also had a laminated guide in English. So when she was done talking, we could kind of skim through and give Eliza what she had missed or if there's any key things we thought. But it's also used as a wedding venue or an event venue, which does not surprise me because it's wild and it's weird and it's beautiful and you go in and it's really like 3 or 4 different collections, and it's a fun museum because it's basically one man's vision of he wanted to preserve the carnival arts of France, of when these traveling fairs would go around. So there are different sections of the museum that kind of highlight different collections of his, and then he designs them to be kind of an otherworldly festival experience. So there are lots of animatronic old people that like sing songs, and then the guide encourages you to like do the waltz in this big ballroom while these animatronic people sing. But the most exciting thing is there's an older carousel that is a bicycle carousel.
Yes.
At the time, bicycles were, not everyone could have a bicycle, and they were kind of like the new amazing technology. So this way, everyone could experience the joy of riding a bicycle. And so you get on these very old rickety bicycles, and there's lots of safety discussions because I think you go up to like 30 miles an hour.
Yes. So they kind of rev you up. I mean, because the whole group is running. This is a people-powered experience. So you hop on a bicycle and everybody pedals, and you can go fairly fast. If you have a lot of strong people on board, they can go pretty fast.
Yeah, and like little kids are not allowed to pedal, and like if you lose your pedal, they like teach you how to like put your feet up on so you don't get like
let them go. Yeah.
But you go so fast, and it's so fun.
Yeah.
It was just like a really magical, weird experience.
Yes, and the whole thing is magical. In French we say féerique. It's like you enter a different world. It's not like something you experience every day, and it's well worth the reservation in advance. And like you said, even if you don't find a tour in English, I think it's worth going because the venue speaks for itself. I mean, it's so fun, to just be there.
Right.
And now between Christmas and New Year every year, every attraction in this museum runs.
Oh, wow.
So the rest of the year is just a few things that you can play with. But between and the dates, I'm not sure of the dates, but I know that it's like the Christmas holidays for French kids. For that whole 2-week period, it's everything runs. So they have enough staff to have everything. And I really want to go at that time because that would be so much fun to try some of these things that you can't play with everything that you look at.
Right, and it was a really lovely time as well because I think as a tourist, especially in August, you often feel like you are just amongst tourists. And so...
Yeah, no, you wouldn't be there. It's French people that go. I mean, it's mostly French people.
It was all French kids and their nannies or their parents and grandparents. And so it was a lovely experience for Eliza to kind of be more immersed in the culture.
Yeah. Let's talk about other things that you enjoyed. So you gave me a list of favorites, which has this Musée des Arts Forains, which we just discussed, Orangerie, which we discussed as well. Did you do the bike tour, or was that somebody else in your group?
No, so my brother and sister-in-law, their second day there, they went on the bike tour of Versailles. And again, we were there.
Was this like a Fat Tire tour or something?
It must have been like a booked tour.
Yeah.
So you take a train there, and then you meet there with like regular bikes. And so because it was the middle of August, like what we had read was that Versailles would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
So because there would be so many tourists. And they said it was, but what they loved about it is the majority of the time they were biking around kind of the outskirts of the area.
Yeah.
And then they were guided to kind of why am I blanking on the word? They were guided to a place a market to buy all their food for a picnic. And then they sat and had a lovely picnic. And then they did a little bit more bike riding. And by that point, the crowds had dispersed a little bit. And the guide was able to tell them kind of what rooms wouldn't be as busy and how to get in without waiting in line. So that was hands down their favorite experience, because they felt like they got to really enjoy the natural beauty of the area. They got to eat really good food. And then they were able to just see a little bit of Versailles, the actual palace, without feeling overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I think that was why it was their favorite.
Right. So you could do exactly the same thing without getting a guide, because you can rent bicycles there if you want. If you don't exit through the main door, since you have a bike, you can exit through the other doors, and re-entry is not a big deal there. So you can get out on your bike, buy your lunch, come back. And the trick to Versailles, which I've explained many times on this podcast, I even did one episode that's called Versailles Yes or No, where I give you more details. But the trick is, do not go to the Palais des Glaces. So that's the Hall of Mirrors is what you call it in English. Don't go until 5 p.m.
Okay.
If you go at 5 p.m., most of the bus people will have left, because Versailles is the type of venue where people come by the bus loads. And so it's really, really busy. So, okay. But that's good to know that they enjoyed that. That's very good.
So they really enjoyed the bike tour, but then the rest of their time was really spent, I think, as you would want as a child, as someone without children in their 40s. They went to a lot of bars and restaurants that they really enjoyed and had a good time at. So that was really kind of their focus. They were the ones that did like the midnight bicycle rides, or what is that called? Like those carts that people bike you on.
Yeah, the tuk-tuk.
The tuk-tuk. So they took a tuk-tuk at like midnight to the Eiffel Tower one night. And, they enjoyed like the late night Paris scene. Sure. Which is good. Why not? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did they give you a list of the restaurants that they liked for the late?
So the two that they really loved was Tiger Bar, which we had read a lot in like kind of like eater blogs and that sort of thing. It is I believe the theme of Tiger Bar is they do a lot of rum drinks. And it was beautiful, and they had a great time with the bartenders there. And then their other favorite, we went to Luxembourg Gardens, and they met us there. And I guess there's a Treize Bakery Paris, which is just on the outside of Luxembourg Gardens.
Okay.
And they enjoyed gin. The gin there is served in a teapot. And then you can mix your own gin cocktails as you sit out and look out over the gardens.
Okay, very nice.
Yeah, so that's what they really enjoyed.
Okay, and what did your parents particularly enjoy?
So my parents did what I would really call the Rick Steves experience. And so they did things like their favorite was the Musée d'Orsay.
Mm-hmm.
And then they joined us for the hop-on, hop-off boat taxi. And
so you took the bateau bus.
Yes.
Okay.
So we hopped on that our second day just to kind of get a lay of the land.
Uh-huh.
And we hopped off near the Champs-Élysées. And then we just kind of wandered, and that's how we kind of stumbled across Le Petit Palais, which was not on our list at all. But again, one of the nice things about not making a huge list is when you stumble upon something that's free and most importantly has free bathrooms, which you can take advantage of with a 9-year-old. We were like, well, we'll just use their restroom and maybe we'll get a snack. And we ended up, it was, again, very few people were there. They had lovely little bits of art that you could, but what was really impressive about Le Petit Palais for us was their courtyard. It was just this very beautiful kind of quiet sanctuary amidst the bustle of the city.
Yes.
And they had a lovely cafe. And so we just ate lunch there, and it was a great little surprise for us.
Yes, it's hard to believe that you're so close to Place de la Concorde, which is a madhouse. And then you go to Petit Palais and, it's so peaceful and lovely. Yes, it's that's a fun one to go to.
Yeah, so that was a lovely kind of stumble upon. The other kind of lovely surprise was the Circus Bakery, which was about 2 blocks from our hotel. And we were just walking down a street, and we were overcome with this smell that was just so decadent and delicious. And we popped in, but it was pretty late, and so we decided to check it out the next day, and I went back to our hotel and Googled it, and of course it had just been written up in Vogue Paris, and so they're known for they really only make 2 things. They're that lovely, very boutique bakery where it's just everything on a butcher board, and they make, I think, 2 or 3 pastries, and that's it, and then coffees.
So what is it called?
It's called Circus Bakery.
Circus Bakery, huh?
Yeah, and they specialize in these very intricately woven cinnamon rolls, and they are so amazing. And there was a line out the door and down the street when we got back there the next morning. But
that line was mostly visitors, right?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Because like a 1 or 2 item bakery in France, this is not something French people patronize. Like we like our French bakeries, like where they have a little bit of everything and we can get our favorite thing. But visitors love those, like they just do macarons, or they just do merveilleux, or they just do, the cinnamon buns or whatever, or the cannelé probably, or, there's one for every pastry. But this is touristy trappy.
Okay, well, it felt very New York to me. It felt very Brooklyn to me.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just,
no.
Just know this is not the French experience. This is more of the Rick Steves experience.
Yeah. Well, it was lovely, and we enjoyed it. The entire bakery was probably the size of 2 dining tables, so it's tiny. But it was wonderful, and it was a lovely little stop for us. And then the other things, we were very nervous being there. We were there because we were going to a conference in England, and so our dates were a time I would not generally have chosen to go to Paris. So it was mid-August when a lot of the restaurants that were recommended to me and a lot of the tours that were recommended to me were closed for the holidays or for the summer vacation. And so we were concerned that maybe the things that were open might be a little subpar, which was absolutely not true. Obviously, like, everything we had was great. And we went on a food tour because we really wanted to do food by mouth, which was, I think that's the name of it, food by mouth. There are a couple food tours that we had that were highly recommended to us, but we ended up finding one online.
No, you called it in your notes. You say you went
yes.
To Saint-Germain-des-Prés original food tours is what it's called.
Yeah, that's who we took.
Okay.
And it was a 3-hour tour. There were my mother and my husband and I and our child, and then one other family. And it was a 3-hour walking tour of chocolates and pastries around Saint-Germain. And it was so lovely because it was places that we probably wouldn't have found on our own, just walking down the main drag. But we were able to go in and sample a little of all these different places.
Yeah.
And one of our favorite places was the Compagnie Française de Poivre et de Spices.
La Compagnie Française des Poivres et des Épices. You actually wrote it out for me, so I know what it is. Yes, it's good.
Yeah. So it was this wild little experience where we walked into this little courtyard that you would never think there would be a shop in it. In the middle, there was a gentleman just playing the accordion, which felt very staged.
Oh, sure.
But then we went into this little store, and it was a store that specializes in making custom spice blends, and they had these amazing different ways that you could sample them and taste them, and it was just a really fun little niche experience.
That's great. And also spices are a good gift to take back, I think, for family and friends. Well, your family and friends were right there with you, but that's usually that's great. For as much as I've been to Saint-Germain-des-Prés, this is not one I've ever looked into, so I will go.
Yeah, it's a very neat space. I guess it's only been open about a year or so.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and so that was, in general, my parents did the Rick Steves stuff, so they did the hop-on, hop-off bus one day. They did Sacré-Cœur, which is where my mom was almost pickpocketed, but I think that's mainly because they were on these massive tour expeditions, and so, when you're surrounded by all people that look like you and have the same outfits and what you look like targets.
Montmartre, it's really hard. There's so many pickpockets, and Montmartre is mostly visitors. I mean, honestly, that's why pickpockets are there. It's so many in such great numbers, is because they know it's mostly visitors, and some of them, they might have looked at your mom and said, "Oh, she looks like an easy target," but maybe she wasn't. Right. So that's good.
Right. So it was. But that's what they really enjoyed. Is they enjoyed the bigger museums. They want to go back. And then the other thing that my mom really loved was the Ile Saint-Louis.
Oh, yeah, l'Île Saint-Louis, yes.
Yes, and I think because my mom is from a smaller town originally. She lives in Minneapolis now, but she likes little breaks in the city that feel a little bit more small towny or a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
And so she felt like, because we could walk there from our hotel, so we walked there and we had ice cream, and just kind of in the evening she enjoyed just kind of walking around there and taking in the architecture and feeling like it wasn't quite as busy as the rest of the city, and
yes.
She thought that was her favorite spot.
Ile Saint-Louis is very residential, so but at the same time there are a lot of restaurants and bars and things like that, so in the evening it kind of wakes up a little bit, but during the day it's very quiet. There's not a lot of people there. It's completely the opposite to Ile de la Cité, which is the next island over. Ile de la Cité is very, very busy during the day because a lot of people work there, but then in the evening it's quiet. And Ile Saint-Louis is the opposite. During the day it's quiet, and the evening it livens up a little bit.
So that was my mom's favorite. And my dad just really enjoyed coming back to the hotel at 5 and then going to a local cafe and just sitting and drinking wine and kind of watching the world go by.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yes.
Sounds great. Are there things that you would do differently next time? I assume you'll go back to Paris at some point.
Yeah, I think... we really, on this one, except for the Festival Museum, we stayed pretty close to the main area, and I would or the center of the city, and I would love to go further out and explore other of the smaller museums further out. Mm-hmm. And then the thing that we had read about as a possible really fun thing to do with kids is we went to the Tuileries Festival. So in the middle of the Tuileries, there during August is basically a carnival, or what we would call them kind of a county fair here in the U.S. So there's there's rides, there's games, there's bad food. And we had told Eliza that after going to the Museum of Decorative Arts, we could go there for a while.
Right, because it's very close.
Right, it's right there. And it was not great.
Yeah, no.
We wasted our time there.
Yeah, it's a Campon kind of experience. He's the guy who put on the Champs-Élysées Christmas market, and he's persona non grata by now with the new mayor of Paris, because she thinks all of this stuff is just low quality, crappy stuff. But he still had a lease to keep doing some of this stuff for several more years. So that's what you experienced. But I think this is about to not happen anymore. One, because Marcel Campon is an old man by now. And two, because the mayor of Paris doesn't want to put up with it. Now, there's going to be elections. You never know. But hopefully she'll keep him away. Whoever is in that position will keep him away, because it's just not good.
It looks like in photographs, like a really delightful experience of ride big swings, like in the middle of the Tuileries, but it's really low budget. Like I didn't want my child on a lot of the rides.
Right. And also he hires all these blondie Russian girls. They're 15, 16, and they're all cute, but no. Yeah. Okay.
So anyways, avoid that if it's still happening.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we would do is we would probably make a. I know that you can kind of wander into any restaurant, but I will say that I would say one of the negative parts of staying where my dad chose is that it was very touristy. I know that there are, so I think a lot of the restaurants really catered to that huge tourist audience.
Right.
So if we had stayed, I was looking at staying in the Marais or in a little bit further out, I think maybe you would have been able to wander into restaurants that felt a little bit more homey or a little bit more French and not quite as touristy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. All the restaurants that are right around the Shakespeare and Company bookstore, so within a quarter mile of there, it's just touristy restaurant. There might be one or two that are better than average, but all the ones I've made the same mistake. Like when I've stayed in that area, at the end of a long day, you've been walking all day and you're tired and you're hungry, and you'll just I'll just eat here. It doesn't matter. And then you go, that wasn't that great. I mean, it was fine. It's not like I got sick or whatever, but, you just don't want to do that.
We didn't have any bad food at all. I just felt like a lot of the places that we ended up, because we were so tired by the end of the day, were close to our hotel and were thereby a little touristy. And I would have loved, if we were to go back, I would probably stay in a different area because another reason that we stayed there is that it's very walkable to the major tourist areas.
Yeah.
And so, but because my husband and I have both lived in London, New York, DC, Seattle, we're very comfortable. Like the metro there is super easy to use.
Yeah.
So we would have been very comfortable staying a little bit further out and taking the metro more. Whereas my dad wasn't. So that was another choice of, which is understandable. He's like 75. He doesn't want to have to navigate a new transportation system.
Sure. So if you just go up the hill a little bit from where you were, so you were right around the Saint-Michel metro station, RER station. It's a massive station. If you just go up a little bit towards Odéon, there you have a lot of very nice French restaurants. They're still tourists, but they're much nicer. And you're just maybe a kilometer away, Yeah. So, you just happen to be right in the middle of the nuts, food wise, it's a bit of a desert there.
Right. But in general, I think traveling with 3 generations, we were a little nervous about it. We sat down before and had an expectations meeting where everyone kind of went around over dinner and said, what's the one thing you really want to what are your expectations for this trip? Because that way we could know, my dad does want to take a nap every day at 2. So, that's just what he's going to do. And my brother and sister-in-law, we're not going to get up before 9 a.m. So we shouldn't see them at breakfast. That's fine. But then we had our expectations set. Everyone knew kind of what the one thing they wanted to do while they were there. So we made sure that happened. And so I think what was really fun about that is that when we did come together for dinner, or a couple times we just kind of brought bottles of wine back and had a bottle of wine and some cheese or what have you in the lovely hotel lobby area. It was nice because you kind of felt like you had 3 trips, because you shared what you did that day and my parents shared what they did. So it felt like you kind of were living vicariously through these different experiences.
Yeah.
So with a 9-year-old, we couldn't go out late at night and experience, the midnight Eiffel Tower experience or all of the different bars. But we heard about them and we saw them on the Instagram feeds as my brother and sister-in-law were walking around. So it was fun because we really did feel like you had a bigger experience than maybe you did, because you were able to kind of follow along with their trips as well.
Mm-hmm. So did you did you listen to the podcast at all before you went?
Yep. So I listened for about a year. So in preparation, I listened for about a year, maybe a little bit longer, and I was a part of the Facebook group. So that was super helpful. There were certain ones, especially because we were going in August and we were there on a national holiday. Those are the ones that I listened to more than once. Once, like a year out, and then as we got closer, I kind of re-listened to kind of make sure I was remembered. So we listened to the first time in Paris, traveling in August, because it really does change the experience.
Yes.
I think in some ways. The one thing that my daughter said, having then we traveled to London afterwards, is her issue with Paris in August was she felt like there were so many tour groups, and especially at the time we were there were a lot of tour groups from what appeared to be Asian countries, where there were, maybe 100 people. They all had their headphones on, and some of them could be just culturally, it was more acceptable to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of pushing in front of you or wanting to stay as a whole group. But when you wait for 100 people to kind of move past you, it can be a little overwhelming. And so she felt that was challenging at that time.
Very astute young lady. It annoys the heck out of French people too.
So that was hard, but we listened to that, and then the ones on Paris transportation, because I'd never been there. We listened to the different ones you had about taking the bus versus the metro versus, Uber, and we took all of those and found them all to be equally successful. It was just how much time do you have? Where are you going? And we found it to be such an incredibly easy city to get around.
Yeah, Paris is pretty easy too. I mean, some people will prefer to take a taxi, others will want to take an Uber, whatever, or the metro or the buses, or there's so many ways to do this. But of course, you're used to big cities. That's the thing. People who've never been in a big city, it can be a little bit intimidating because it's all different.
Right. And I mean, again, so even going to the train station, my brother and sister-in-law were going to the same train station at the same time with us, and we didn't travel together because I had extra metro tickets that I wanted to use up, and I'm very comfortable taking a suitcase on the metro. And my sister-in-law was like, no, we're taking an Uber. So they took an Uber, and we took the metro, and we met them there. So
yeah. Well, that's the good thing about doing it the way you did, is that you were in the same hotel, which is a good idea because then you can meet up after, at the end of the day or first thing in the morning or whatever. But you all had different experiences. And on your, the guest notes that you sent me, I will put that up so people can see all the details of what the different age groups did. Because I think that's fascinating to see. What do people do? I mean, as they get older or with a kid or whatever, it makes a big difference.
And I think it made everyone a lot happier. It's only 5 days, so you don't have a lot of time to experience a large city, and it's a really special trip. So you want to make sure that everyone is getting the most out of their experience. And for some people, that might be together time. For some people, that might be, we want to be together the whole time because that's what is going to make a good experience. For my family, that wasn't it. Everyone kind of wanted to see what they wanted to see and see it in a way that they were most comfortable with and then meet back together. And that was really special for us. And then everyone really got to kind of experience Paris in the way that suited them the best.
Well, Maren, you have been, no, not Maren, Maren, right?
Yeah.
Maren.
Yeah,
oh,
Maren.
Yes. Sorry about that. The vowels in English, some of them I don't know how to say them. So anyway, Maren, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this great stuff with everybody. I think it's invaluable to hear how people trips went. That's why I keep doing this, is because that's the real skinny, that's the real stuff that, because, you said your brother read all these blogs, and they're wonderful travel writers who write beautiful blogs, and they don't really tell it like it is. They just, they're good writers. Let's put it this way. So I would much rather to talk to somebody like you who just says, this was good and this was not so good.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. We listen to so many of the podcasts of other people's trips to kind of prepare ourselves. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. And I hope you come back to France at some point. And maybe next time you need to not stay in Paris and just go see some other places.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Thank you very much. Merci. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you, Joy Chu. Susan Gilbert would say in French. I'm not sure if you say Gilbert. Probably it's Gilbert, right? Anyway, Susan, I'm sorry if I butchered it. Michael Groves, Danielle Giesling, Sheridan, and Jam Clemson, Jennifer Gruenke, and Leslie Harrington for pledging to support the show on Patreon this week. You make me feel like the show is worth something to you, and that's a great feeling. Patrons enjoy several rewards, including membership into a secret Facebook group, Lunch Break French, where you get to test your French comprehension, which is the most difficult part of learning a language because you could do Duolingo for the rest of your life and still not be able to understand what a real French person is saying to you. The French History Brief. And patrons can also hire me to be their trip consultant. This week, I published 2 of my favorite photos of France for the France Photography Buffs, which is also one of the rewards. One is the Tour de l'Horloge du Palais de la Cité, that sadly many people miss because they don't know that they should be looking up. And there's so many things to look at in Paris. They didn't know it was there. The second is a great point of view towards the village of Saint-Cirque-la-Popie in Occitanie, in my neck of the woods, one of the most beautiful villages of France. I care a lot about my patrons, and I try to give you excellent value for your $5. Visit patreon.com/join us to see the different reward tiers, and thank you so much for giving back. My thanks also to Melissa Jacob for sending in a one-time donation using the green button on any page on joinusinfrance.com that says Tip Your Guide. Donations of $20 and over also get you an invite to the secret Facebook group. And if you'd like to support the show without spending a penny you wouldn't have otherwise, before you go shopping on Amazon, go to the bottom of any page on joinusinfrance.com and click on the Amazon ad. Because you came to Amazon through my site, I get a small commission and it doesn't cost you a penny more. And as Black Friday and the Christmas giving season approach, that click on the Amazon banner ad could help me pay for the hosting for this podcast for several months. So I'm grateful for those of you who will remember to do it. Rosalind Grace wrote a wonderful review of my Marais tour on Facebook. You can walk my tours with the VoiceMap app, and it's like I'm in your pocket taking you around Paris, and for a very small cost too. Anyway, here's what Rosalind wrote. Annie Sargent, thank you so much for the personal tour today. We did the VoiceMap tour of the Marais, and although we had already walked around this area some, our eyes were opened yet again to the little details we didn't see the first time. I loved that there was history and food recommendations all in one. My husband kind of thought I was crazy for wanting to walk around and do this type of tour, but when it was done, he asked me if there were more like it. We were able to follow your directions so easily, and it worked in airplane mode, as I don't have any international data on my phone. Montmartre tomorrow. Can't wait to see what we learn tomorrow. And Steve Bond wrote, last night in Paris, sad face. We did both the Montmartre and Le Marais audio tours. Thank you, Annie. We saw parts of Paris we could have never seen without your guidance. Thank you so much, guys. But honestly, you are missing out if you're not using my tours. Yes, it's true. And one huge advantage is that you can do them whenever you want. Like when it's not raining or snowing in Paris, which it is right now. I just looked at the weather. You can do them whenever you want. And you can pause, start, resume, go again, whatever. You can do it twice. You can do it 5 times. It's yours. You're free. In-person tours are wonderful, but they are a lot more limiting. Well, for one thing, you're with a big group and you have to do them whether it's raining or not. So look for the VoiceMap app on your smartphone, then Paris, then Annie Sargent. And as a podcast listener, once you have the VoiceMap app installed on your phone, you can go to joinusinfrance.com/audio tours and buy 1 or 2 or 3 at a discount. And I'll email you the codes to unlock my tours. For my personal update this week, my wonderful husband wanted to be helpful, so he washed my cars and filled it up with gas. Unfortunately, he was distracted, and he put unleaded gas in my old Volkswagen diesel. He drove off, and within a couple hundred meters, the car started sputtering, and the engine died. Now, these things happen a lot. As a matter of fact, when he called our mechanic and said, I did something really stupid, the mechanic interrupted him and asked if he'd put the wrong fuel in one of our cars. Yes, mechanics get those calls frequently. Anyway, the mechanic did his magic and my good old Volkswagen is running again. But there's a reason why I wanted to tell you about this. When you rent a car in France, you might make the same mistake when you fill it up. As a matter of fact, one of my guests on the show had this problem. If you listen to episode 165, we discussed it about 15 minutes into the show. The car rental agency, whichever it is, they will probably tell you that you are renting a diesel car if that's the case. But when you go to the pump, it won't necessarily say diesel. Now, newer pumps say diesel, and the handle is yellow. But in many older gas stations, it still says gazole, Gazole, and it is confusing. And on top of that, in America, what you're used to is that the nozzle for diesel won't even fit into an unleaded gas car. In France, all the nozzles are the same size, so you have to pay attention when you're pumping gas. And remember, unleaded is green and diesel is yellow. At least that's the case in the newer gas stations. A word about the Join Us in France newsletter. I will start sending it out once a month on the second Thursday of each month. I have just sent one out, and it contained 3 sections. One, a section of big events coming up in France in the next month. 2, a month in review. So these are a few stories that dominated the news in France. And 3, announcements about what's new with Annie, Elise, the podcast, all of that. The monthly reviews for the news, they always involve some political stories. I don't choose only political stories, but there's some of them. And normally I avoid talking politics on the show and on the Facebook group. But please don't expect me to comment on news stories and be neutral. I don't have it in me. So if you want to receive the newsletter, go to any page on joinusinfrance.com and look for the green button that says Extras. And if you don't want to receive and read the newsletter, please do not subscribe, because I have to pay a company to maintain this list, and I have no desire to keep people on the list who don't want to be there. Now, newsletters often end up in the spam folder. Don't forget to check. If you signed up and you don't see it, check your spam folder. And, if I notice that you haven't opened the last few newsletters, I will purge you off the list, because, again, I have no interest in emailing people who don't want to hear from me. You know what I mean? Do you know someone who will be visiting France? Tell them to search for Join Us in France wherever they like to hang out online. And if you could talk them into listening to the podcast, you'd be doing me a great favor, in my humble opinion, because this is where all the best stuff happens. They can find it wherever they get their podcasts, or on Spotify, or on Pandora. And if you invite them to the Facebook group, do tell them to answer the questions, or I won't let them in. Because I'm mean. No, I'm not. I'm just being realistic. If they can't answer 3 questions, then, they don't want to be there. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Have a great week of trip planning, or a great time in France, if that's where you are. And I'll talk to you next week. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2019 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.